Hey folks, Kevin here at Strobepro.com, begrudgingly sliding out from behind the camera to talk about this adorable little guy, the iT30Pro. This is a small TTL flash that can kind of replace a pop-up flash, but I don't think that's the most interesting thing about it. The iT30Pro has sender and receiver modes, so you could use this as just your mainstay controller and have a little bit of fill flash when you need it. Now you can do that with any of Godox's TTL speedlights as well, but having a speedlight on top of your camera all day isn't always ideal. The iT30Pro is actually smaller than the X2T controller here. Just look at that. And the way they've been able to cram a small flash/radio controller into such a small package is by using a built-in lithium battery. And our experience with the built-in battery on the X3 controller has been very good. Mind you, if you are using this as a flash, you're probably not going to get nearly as much mileage out of this battery as you do with the X3, so keep that in mind. As usual, we're going to take you through every feature and function of this device. Let's get into it. Time to unbox the iT30Pro. It comes in this cool little silver box. And one thing I noticed is it's got a little sticker seal on it. This is actually not something we've seen on Godox products before. It can actually be helpful for us to not have these boxes sealed because we might just put a cheeky little firmware update on your unit before we send it out to you if one is available. And we would still like the ability to do that. But think what you want when you see a seal that's either broken or unbroken. I'm just going to really gently peel this one off. Okay, inside, you're first going to see the manual. You're not going to really need this because you're going to watch the rest of our super awesome video. And you've got the iT30 itself, which is wrapped up here. You get a little baggie to carry it in. That's really cute. And a little charge cable. It's USB-A to USB-C, so this should work with any wall block that you happen to have, or you can just plug it into your computer to charge it. There's something just kind of awkward about holding this tiny little thing and talking towards you guys. Are you picking up on that? That's a little better. Something to grip onto. Now, let's talk about this thing some more. The iT30Pro has technical specifications, including, but not limited to, a guide number of 15 meters at ISO 100, 3, maybe 4 external flash control groups. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And of course, this is on Godox's X series wireless system, which has a range of up to 100 meters. It's got TTL. It's got high-speed sync. Set your expectations low for this flash in high-speed sync, but it is there. You can also put this in its receiver mode and use it as an off-camera flash if you are so inclined. It has the quick pairing feature that is present on Godox's latest strobes. It has a full-color touchscreen and that built-in battery that I mentioned. And I should also say that this supports USB-C fast charging, so it is easy to keep this thing topped up. I also did have a portable lithium power pack plugged into this, and it seemed to be powering it while it was on and flashing just fine. So for those of you curious about that, it does work, though Godox doesn't supply any advice as to whether or not that's recommended. As far as other physical features go, there is a little dial up here on the top for those who don't like the touchscreen. The dial controls should feel fairly familiar if you've used Godox's other controllers. It also has a built-in wide-angle diffuser that is accessed with the lever on the side here. So you pop it up to put the wide-angle diffuser in place, and you can maybe see what effect that's having there. It's kind of a fun little fidget toy. Next to the USB-C port, which is used for charging and firmware updates, by the way, there's a 2.5 millimeter sync port. And one thing I found surprising on a device this small is they even included a little optical sensor on the top there, so you can use this in S1, S2 receiver modes as well. And lastly, the way you take this off the camera, I really like. There's just a simple button release, so I press that and then drag backwards to pull it off of the hot shoe. When installing it on the camera, you don't have to press anything. You just line up the hot shoe and give it a slide, and you're gonna feel it click into place. And if you just wiggle it there, you can test to make sure that that locking pin is down. Now there's no kind of angling up and down or bouncing this flash off of stuff. It's just gonna be straight on. It's gonna give you that kind of classic point and shoot look, which I'm told is making a resurgence right now. Whether you're into that look or not, you can use this as a simple fill flash instead, rather than the dominant flash, just something to bring those shadows up a little bit. Now, given that this is a TTL flash, it's worth a quick mention that you will definitely want to get the version of this that is suitable for your camera. This iT30Pro comes in Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fujifilm, and also an OM system / Lumix version. Let's go through all of the menu functions of the iT30Pro now. To turn on the iT30Pro, you're just going to long press the test button here. And then to confirm that, you're just going to rotate this top dial. That's just there as a secondary step to make sure you don't accidentally turn the unit on in your bag. And it was already on, and I was already moving the wheel here, as you can see. By default, it's going to look like that when you first turn it on. So it's in TTL mode, and there is no exposure compensation applied. So if you had this on your camera, it is pretty much ready to use. What TTL does is it automatically adjusts the flash power for you. So there's a little pre-flash that gets sent out, and in a tiny fraction of a second, your camera measures that and then tells the flash what power to use. You'll also notice that the screen went dim there. That is just there as a power saving measure. In TTL mode, you can adjust the dial there just like that. You can also, of course, use the touch screen, and you can click and drag like that. I'm going to use the pen to make this a little easier to see, hopefully. But you can also press the plus and minus there, and it's going to go up and down in third stops. So with this saying +1 here, what that means is I'm asking the flash to take the TTL exposure and overexpose by 1 stop. So you might want to adjust that for one reason or another. You might just find that on your camera, you're kind of consistently underexposing, so maybe you set the exposure compensation up a little bit. TTL also relies on your metering mode, so depending on which metering mode you're in, you might find that if you are taking a picture of something that is very light colored, like the classic example would be a bride in a dress, you know, if that white dress is taking up a good portion of your frame and you are in evaluative metering, you might be getting a bit of underexposure from your TTL. So you could either change the metering mode and like spot meter on the bride's face, for example, or you can just very quickly adjust the exposure compensation as needed. And this, of course, works the other way as well. You can go into the negatives down to -3 as well. So if you want to intentionally underexpose in TTL, you can do that. So that's TTL mode, the most basic way you can use this flash. If you want to switch your mode, you've got two options. You can either drag down from the top there, and you're going to see this new submenu. You can see where it says TTL. I can switch that between TTL, manual, and multi. We will talk about manual next, but I'm just going to send that menu back up. You can also just press the menu button there, which is the middle button, brings up this same menu. So what we want to do there is just change the TTL to M for manual, and then we can slide the menu back up. In here, you're going to see your power expressed as a fraction, and the minimum power on this flash is 1/128th. So that means it goes down 8 stops, if I'm not mistaken. And you can adjust that all the way up to 1/1 representing full power. So this fractional scale is useful because, of course, anytime you go up or down a full stop, you're either halving or doubling the amount of light that's hitting your camera sensor. So if I'm getting a dead-on exposure at f11 here, for example, and then I dial down to f8 without changing anything else, I could move this down to 1/2 and I would get the same exposure. Now, shooting in manual may not always make sense, but if you were like setting up a portrait, for example, shooting in manual just ensures that your results are going to be similar from frame to frame, assuming the distance between your flash and your subject doesn't change. So we have two other buttons here. We have the flash test button. If I just press this, you're going to see the flash fires. So this is just a way of testing that it's working, or if you were using a light meter, you can have this fire at whatever power it's set to. So what you just saw there was a half power flash. You'll notice if I do go up to full power, it takes a little bit longer for that green light to come back on. Once that light is on, it means it's ready to flash again, but it does need that moment to recharge or recycle, as we say. All in all, pretty quick recycle time. This isn't the most powerful flash, but at least it's ready again quickly at almost any power setting you set it to. You'll also notice on the top there's a button that says Set. That is used for confirming choices in menus. It's actually not going to do anything here, but we will show you other places where it is used. Now we're going to have to talk about multi. So again, I swiped down to get to that menu and I changed M to multi, and now I'm swiping back up. Now, multi is a seldom used niche feature that takes a really long time to explain, but I'll try to get through it quickly for you. So what multi does is it's going to send out a bunch of flashes. I'm not sure if you could have seen that on the background. The camera doesn't always catch flashes, especially at these low powers here. But it did fire, what was that, 5 times? And some people mistake this for the mode you want to be in when you are trying to capture fast action and just take lots of pictures and have your flash be ready again quickly. This is not that. This is meant more for long exposures where you're going to have multiple flashes within that one exposure. So it's used for capturing sequences of movement. So you're essentially going to catch your subject in multiple places as they move across the frame. This works really well on dark, ideally black backgrounds. Otherwise, if there's some, ambient light present, your subject is going to look partly transparent wherever they appear in the frame. So there's a few adjustments we can make here. So again, we have just, the power. But as I go up here, you're going to see that it stops me at 1/4. And what that means is that at these other settings, the number of times, so I'm asking you to fire 5 times, no, actually, sorry, 3 times at 5 hertz, it's only able to give me 3/4 power flashes in that time frame. So another way to think of hertz as a unit of measurement, it's frequency, and what it essentially means is per second. So 5 hertz essentially means 5 flashes per second in this case. So 3 flashes at 5 hertz is 3 flashes at a rate of 5 flashes per second. Hopefully that's not too confusing. This will probably show up a little better on camera. So if 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, so that's what that looks like. Now, I could get more flashes, but I would have to reduce the power. So I can go down here. And then this is the first place where you're going to use the set button to make additional adjustments. If I hit it once, you can see I'm highlighting the 3 there, the number of times. So here I'm at 1/32 power. I can get that up to, oh wow, is that, yeah, I can get that up to 50 flashes. And I should have thought this through before pressing that button, but there it goes. You can hear it ticking away. Maybe you won't see every flash there, but yeah, 50 flashes. So if I hit the set button again there, I can adjust the frequency in hertz. And I'm going to use the dial here again. And you can see as I start to go up there, you notice something? My number of times started to change. So it does seem to prioritize the frequency here. As I'm going up, you can see the number of times went down. I can go all the way up to 100 hertz at 1/32 power, 12 flashes at that power setting. So there's kind of some quirks to work out in this mode, but you can kind of play with that. And 100 hertz is so fast, you're just going to hear this like little buzz when I press the test button. Nip. Let's do that again. Nip. Nip. Okay, that's kind of fun. Anyway, most of you aren't really going to touch this, and those who do need this probably didn't need all of that explained, so I do apologize. Moving on. So if I pull down that top menu again, this might be a good time for me to explain that there might be some differences you see here depending on which version you have. So this happens to be the Canon version. And one thing about the Canon system that's not the same on all of these is you can adjust the sync setting on the flash. So I just went from first curtain to high-speed sync and then second curtain. If I set that there, it's going to crosstalk with the camera. So if I went into the camera menu, I could see actually that whatever setting I put there on the controller is also registered on the camera side, and also vice versa. If I set high-speed sync in the camera, I'm going to see high-speed sync here. Not all of these work that way. For example, in the Nikon system, you are just going to go into your auto FP setting, select whatever the fastest option is, and then your camera is going to automatically switch between first curtain and high-speed sync when you roll over your flash sync speed. So if you are using high-speed sync, just keep that in mind. In the Canon system here, if I have HSS enabled and I happen to be below my flash sync speed, which is 1/200th of a second most of the time on Canon bodies, you are going to get a first curtain flash, a regular first curtain flash, until you go above that sync speed. Then you're going to see a bit of a drop in your flash output because high-speed sync just works a little bit differently. And that's why high-speed sync generally works best with more powerful flashes, much more powerful flashes than this one. So I did tell you to temper your expectations for using HSS with this, but that is where you access it. I am just going to put that back to first curtain sync. So the other things you're going to see here are the wireless menu on the top left there, and then the custom functions menu on the top right there. But before we move on, I should note that there are actually 2 more hidden icons. If you just drag down a bit more, you're going to see those. And that one on the top right there is really important. That is going to toggle through whether this is set up for on-camera use, if you are going to use the sender mode and command other flashes, or if you're going to use this as an off-camera receiver flash. And this guy right here is the lock. If I long press that, there we go. It locks my settings. So if you were really worried about accidentally changing something, you can long press that to turn the lock on. And then to unlock it, you're just going to press anywhere on the screen and hold for a couple of seconds there, and now it's unlocked again. Before moving on, I'm just going to switch back to manual, and I'm just going to make a very quick note of the other things you're going to see on the display there. So on the top left, you're going to see the mode, which is M for manual. On the top right, you're going to see your battery indicator. And on the bottom, we actually have a focus distance scale. So that actually only works when the camera is turned on because it needs to know your camera settings. And I actually also need to quickly focus. So I'm just half pressing there, and then it sends a little signal there. So I happen to be at f11 and ISO 400, and it's kind of telling me that I'm going to get a good exposure at a bit over 2 meters there. So that's what that means. That will change, of course, if I change any of my settings. So if I reduce the flash power and then I half press again, you can see what effect that had there. Now in TTL mode, it works a little bit differently. If I go back there and I half press, what it's actually going to give me now is more of like a solid bar, and that's just giving me a range of distances at which I can get a good exposure. So right now what it's telling me is that I can get a good TTL exposure at anywhere from 0 meters to, what is that, maybe like 3 meters. And if I wanted to get beyond 3 meters, I would have to relax one of my camera settings. So I could, for example, open up my aperture to like f5.6. Now when I half press, you can see that I am okay out to more distances there. Let's quickly just talk about this first wireless menu. So if you are familiar with the Godox radio system, you may have seen this before. This is where you select your channel and your ID. So the main thing to know here is that all of your devices, so whether it's your controller, your off-camera flashes, your flash that is controlling other flashes, all of your devices need to be on the same channel. And if you have an ID selected, that needs to match up as well. So you can see by default we're on channel 21 here, and I can change the ID. The ID actually goes up to 99. Now generally we think that the ID feature is not needed. 32 channels is generally enough. The reason you might want to use an ID is if you work in crowded spaces that have other photographers who might be running Godox gear, then you can select a channel and an ID, and then your chances of, being on the same channel and ID are much smaller than being on just the same channel. But there are 32 channels, which I think is enough. Just make sure you're kind of away from the default ones, I would say. So depending on the device, the default channel seems to be either 1 or 21. So I would select something different. Sure, channel 17. That's going to make the chances of popping someone else's strobes or having someone pop my strobes a lot more slim than if I was to stay on that default channel. Let's just hit the menu button and back out of there. And let's go back up to these top icons again. So this is one of the most important icons here. So right now, this symbol means that it's ready to be used as an on-camera flash, and it's not going to trigger any other flashes or act as a receiver flash. Now the first option there is the sender mode, and the way you can tell that is the radio waves are traveling away from the device, so it's acting as a transmitter. If I hit that one more time, you can see that the radio waves are going towards the device, so it's acting as a receiver or off-camera flash. I think it's generally going to be less common to use this as a receiver flash, so let's go over the sender mode first. There we go. I can just slide up again. And you're going to see some new things pop up on the screen here. In the top left now you can see my channel, and I have some flash groups available to me. Now here is one very important difference between the Canon model and some of the others. On the Canon version, you are going to see groups A, B, C, and D available in the sender mode here. On the iT30Pro for other camera versions, you are more likely going to see M, A, B, and C. On the Canon system, your A group is always your sender flash. So you can set other flashes to group A, but the problem is any changes you make to group A are also affecting this flash. So if I'm wanting to fire this flash, the A group is what I need to adjust there. Again, that is for the Canon version only. But if you've used another one and you're wondering where your M group is, it is not here. So what you generally want to do is have A control your sender flash, and you're just going to assign all your off-camera flashes to the other groups, B, C, and D. Now there are various ways we can control our groups. So right now A, which again is this flash in this case, has a manual power set, and it is 1/8. I can grab the group and drag it along. I'll just leave that back on 1/8. If I move the dial now, because I have multiple groups available, you're going to see this little box appear, and I can come down and see my other groups. But if you prefer to use the dial, you highlight the group you want, and then you're going to hit that set button, and now I can make my adjustments in 1/3 stops. So some people are still going to prefer that over the touch screen, though I think because this uses third stops, the touch screen is pretty easy to use precisely, and you can just hit those little plus minus buttons if you need to make those smaller adjustments. And of course I'm fumbling because I'm using a pen. It's a little bit tricky there. But get back to, oh my gosh, there we go. Back to 1/8. Trust me, it is a lot easier with your finger. Now to control the modes of our groups, we're not going to use this drag down menu anymore. In fact, on the Canon here, you see the little GR has replaced where the mode used to be. Now, if I do tap that, I can go into multi-mode. And I can come back out and I can adjust the multi-mode on a group by group basis. This is super niche, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Let's go back to the GR mode. Now to change the mode of a group, you can see that B is currently off. So what that means is it's just not going to fire. And that can be pretty useful, particularly for the A group in this case, because it's my master flash. If I long press on that, I can turn it off. So now I'm using this purely as a controller. And if I just enable my other groups, There, now I have B set to TTL, for example. Let's long press that one more time. There we go. Now we're in manual, and you know I can scroll down here and I can set up my C and D groups. Maybe we'll just leave those on TTL for fun. In this example, my A group is turned off, so nothing is going to come out of here. I'm not going to get any fill flash from the iT30Pro. I'm just going to fire my off-camera groups. Now, unfortunately, we do only have 3 off-camera groups to play with. The Canon version does have a little trick up its sleeve, though, which I will show you later. I don't know why Godox has done this. Like, obviously, we could just keep scrolling and have as many groups as we wanted. So I would have liked to have seen the standard 5 on this. Maybe if enough people complain to Godox about this, they will take pity on us and add those additional groups. But that's pretty much the one reason why I can't just, like, give a blanket recommendation and say, yeah, get this, use it as your controller. Some people are going to need those extra groups for doing, you know, more complex stuff in the studio. I have on occasion used all 5 of the groups that are normally available. So this device is a little bit more limited in that capacity. So I brought in an iT200Pro 2 just to show you how this would work in real space. So firstly, I need to sync up my channel. You can see I'm on 21 there, and if you remember, we selected 17 on this one. But here's where I'm going to show you something a little different. If I go into my wireless menu, you'll see at the right there's an option for sync. So I'm going to actually just press that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the menu on my iT200Pro 2. I'm going to go into the wireless mode there, and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click wireless sync. And just like that, you can see I'm on channel 17. If I had selected an ID, it would have sent the ID across as well. But again, for our purposes, I don't think that's necessary. Now I can hit menu and go out. You can see that this is still doing its thing. So the way this is intended to work is you would start the process on the controller and you can sync as many devices as you need to. So the new Godox strobes that support this wireless sync feature, if you have them, you can go around to each of them, hit wireless sync, and they're all going to pick up the sender flash or from the controller or the sender flash in this case. But once I'm done, I can just hit cancel there and I can hit the menu to back out. Now there's still a problem. You know, I have my A group disabled because I don't want to fire this on my Canon camera. So I do need to set the iT200Pro 2 to, let's set it to our B group. So I'll go back into the wireless menu and I'm going to select group B. And you can see that it says B now. So if I am going to hit the test button here, it sends my settings across. So I had 1/16 power manual mode selected for my B group, and you can now see that on my iT200Pro 2. There might be a bit of delay at this distance. It can be a little funky when they're close together. Actually, it's working pretty good, but you can see my power changing in real time there. And again, if I long press on that, I can turn it off. I can switch it to TTL. You can see that they are communicating very well. Now, if your strobe doesn't support that wireless sync feature I showed you, all you have to do is manually select the channel, make sure it matches up. And we have videos for the vast majority of Godox strobes, so if you want to know how to do that on your particular model, we should have something for you. So the other way we might use our iT30Pro is off camera. And I know it's technically sitting on a camera right now, but let's just use our imaginations and pretend it's somewhere else. So I've got my X2T controller here and I've already set it to channel 17. And you can see that I'm using group A, and that's fine again because this is now an off-camera flash. So if I hit my A group and I make some changes there, you can see I'm actually in manual mode here, and I might have to go ahead and hit the test button to get that to register. There we go. Now that I'm connected and if I make changes, you can see them coming across here. Now, here's a very interesting little quick tip. You can see that I'm going down below 1/16 and I am stuck at 1/16. Well, the reason for that is high-speed sync is limited to a minimum of 1/16 power. So even though my camera might not use high-speed sync because I could be below my flash sync speed, having this set here does impose that limit. So I will want to go back to first curtain sync there. And now, If I back out and I hit the test button, you can see I'm able to use the whole power range. So that was just a bit of an aside there, but it is something you will run into. Anyway, that's really all there is to using this in its receiver mode. When you are in the receiver mode, the controller you're using is going to take over all the functions of this flash. So if you want a full breakdown of our controllers, this works with any X series wireless controller, even back to the old X1. You can use the X2T here. You can use an X Pro, an X Pro 2, or a brand new X3 radio controller as well. And I believe we have videos for all of those. So check out those guides if you need them. The final thing we need to go through on the iT30Pro is just the custom functions menu. So I'm going to scroll down here and you can see that little list icon in the top right. I'm going to hit that. Now the very first function you see is trigger distance, and I actually already changed this from its default for the purpose of this video. The default is actually going to be 1 to 100 meters. This is the setting I recommend for outdoor use. I've found that the 0 to 30 meters outdoors, even if you're kind of within that prescribed distance, can be a little spotty. But for in the studio, 0 to 30 is really handy, especially if you have like a fill light close to your camera position. If you're kind of within that 0 to 1 meters, the triggering can be really spotty, so this is a very easy way to troubleshoot that. We can go back one step just by hitting the menu button, and next up we have sender flash. Now this is something that is on the Canon version, and this is that little trick that I told you about before. So what this does, if I turn this off, now when I'm in the sender mode, this just won't fire. It doesn't matter if I have the A group enabled or disabled, but what that does is it gives me my A group back. So if I go back out here and let's go to the sender mode. Now, if I enable my A group, I can use this for my off-camera flashes now. So I actually have 4 groups available to me on this Canon model. So that is the low-key superpower of the Canon version here. Let's go back into our menu. Now next up is Photocell. So that little optical sensor that I showed you on the top here, you have a couple of modes for using that. So S1 is looking for any manual flash. So whenever this flash sees another flash, it's just going to fire immediately. S2, that is the reason you have this setting is for ignoring a pre-flash. So if you wanted to trigger this with another flash in TTL, it's going to ignore that little pre-measuring flash and fire on the second one. I think in some cases you might be able to get away with using S2 when you have like red eye reduction or something turned on your main flash, but that would be like a less common use. TTL would be the common one. So S1 if you want to optically trigger this with a manual flash, S2 if you want to use a TTL flash. So again, these photocell triggering modes, they're just looking for literally any flash, so it's not ideal. If you had other people at an event venue using their flashes, this has no way of distinguishing between your flashes and their flashes. So really, I would recommend sticking to the radio modes if at all possible, but this gives you something to use in a pinch, which, you know, might come in handy for unforeseen reasons. Oh, and you can actually just swipe up to get back to the main custom functions menu there. You don't have to press the menu button. I kind of learned that between takes. Next we have the TCM function. Now if you enable this guy and we just back way out there, what that's going to do is if we go to our regular on-camera mode there, if I was to turn on my camera and I just take a shot in TTL, and now I switch this to manual mode, it converts the TTL flash I just used into this manual power. So let's just test that a bit. If I close down my aperture from f5.6 to f11, let's say, and I go back to TTL, and I take another picture, and I convert it back to manual, you can see that I am, just about 2 stops brighter on that. So the 1/16 and change to 1/4 and change. So that is working correctly. So that's just a really quick way of metering. If you like the TTL exposure that you're getting, you can just kind of quickly switch. But keep in mind that it's always going to behave like that if you have that setting enabled. So if I go back to the TCM function, I'm just going to turn that off because I don't want to forget that I have that there. So with that disabled, let's just see how that changes things. So if I go back out, I've got my 1/4 and 1/3 there. Let's switch back to TTL. And in my camera, I'm going to go back to f5.6 and I'm going to take a picture. And now I'm going to go back to manual, and you can see it just saved the setting I had before instead of using that TTL exposure to change the manual power. So that's kind of what I'm used to, but that TCM function again is quite useful for quickly metering something and then staying at a consistent flash power after that. There are 3 power saving options in here, and the first is standby, and I had to do some real experimenting to figure out exactly how this worked. As far as I can tell, it only applies to the iT30Pro in its on-camera modes, so either in its standard on-camera mode or in the sender mode. And with this enabled, after 90 seconds it will go into standby, and you'll see that indicated by this solid green test light. It'll actually start blinking instead. So supposedly there's some power saving happening there. When I half pressed the shutter or hit the AF on button, it seemed to wake immediately. So I don't think there's any harm in leaving this on. I don't think you're going to miss any shots, but that might vary a little bit from camera to camera depending on how quick it's getting that signal from the hot shoe. The manual also states that with this enabled, the unit will power down completely after 8 hours, and that's separate from the auto power off that I'm going to show you in a moment here. It's unclear if it will still turn off after 8 hours even with this disabled, but in most cases you're going to be better served by one of the shorter auto power off options. Anyway, more on that in a moment. If the iT30Pro is set to its receiver mode, this standby setting seems to have no effect. The light will remain solid green. Now, those auto power off settings. You can customize the amount of idle time it takes before the unit just powers down completely. We have 30, 60, and 90 minutes, and you can also just turn this off. I think the only reason you'd want to turn this off would be if you were going to leave this off camera somewhere and it just needs to be ready, and you might take a long break at some point where you're not triggering the light. Maybe it's up high somewhere and you don't want to have to pull your stand down to kind of re-enable your flash. Otherwise, this feature just ensures that the unit will power down if you forgot to power it down. And that's just going to help in terms of battery life if it's ever needed. Next, we have the screen standby. Now, you might have already noticed that the screen dims after a certain amount of time. That behavior is unchangeable. The screen standby will power down the screen completely after 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. And this applies in all modes. I'll just have this enabled and we'll fast forward and you'll see what I'm talking about. So with this enabled, the screen eventually goes completely black just to save some power. If this is on camera, a half press of the shutter or your AF on button will wake the screen, so it's there again when you need it. If you have your iT30Pro in its receiver mode and the unit goes into screen standby, you can actually continue triggering the unit and the screen will stay black. So that's actually really useful. You don't need the screen on and consuming power when you have this thing off camera and you're using another controller to control it. Next up is the screen brightness. Now this is a very nice and bright display as it is, and you can see that the default's kind of like maybe somewhere around 80%, but you can tune that to your liking. If it was like a really bright day, you could have it like that, but I might even myself just turn it down a little bit. I'll try to roughly put it where it was. But I might turn it down just so it's less hard on the battery, as long as I can still see it, right? So that is that, pretty self-explanatory. Whoops. Next, we have the language. There's just 2 options in here. It is English or Chinese. If you accidentally set that to Chinese and you don't understand it, you're just going to look for that symbol there to get back to English. And then we have a factory reset. So if you've done something on here, you're not sure what you've done, you can restore it to default settings. I'm just going to go into here, and it's kind of asking you to confirm there, but I'm just going to go ahead and apply it. It takes a few seconds. And now I am back to 100% default settings. So my channel is going to be back to 21 if I go into the wireless modes. I'm just in TTL here and yeah, exactly as it was when you first turned it on. And your last feature here is the device info. And mainly this is just where you would check to see which firmware version you are on. Godox will periodically release firmware updates for this device. And I should mention that if Godox did release firmware updates that added features, our video that we're showing you here might become slightly out of date, but we try to note those things as pinned comments when they come up. So that's really it though, guys. Very simple menu. We can go back to the start here. That's all there is to the iT30Pro. So there you have it, that's the iT30Pro. It was a product we were quite excited about, and impressions are still quite good. I think this is going to suit the needs of many people, whether you need just a small bit of fill or a controller, or ideally both. The one caveat being, again, that you don't get the 5 full control groups with this model that you do get on the dedicated controllers. We hope that Godox will be generous and give us those D&E groups on a future firmware update. If you're thinking about buying one of these, consider buying it from Strobepro. We are based in Canada and we offer a 2-year warranty with any flash that we sell at no extra cost. If you're across an ocean from us or just across the border and you find it hard to shop with us, we definitely understand. But if you found this content helpful, consider hitting that subscribe button down below. It really helps us out. Thank you once again for joining us, and until next time, enjoy creating.